From 1998 to 2010, small anonymous circles trained for steadiness under the unknown, laying a disciplined foundation for extraterrestrial contact. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're watching from and what you believe about extraterrestrial contact. History rarely announces its turning points in bright letters. The shift that concerns this story began quietly in 1998, when a few careful people noticed that their ordinary categories no longer explained what their senses were reporting. Night after night, far from traffic and billboards, they met under open skies and taught themselves to become steady instruments. They were not chasing myths. They were practicing method. Their aim was practical. If non-human intelligence drew close, could human beings remain lucid enough to meet it without collapsing into fear, fantasy, or performance? The earliest gatherings were tiny: 2 friends at a fence line, 3 observers on a hill, a handful near dark water. They brought simple tools: paper notebooks, pencils that worked in the cold, red filtered lights to preserve night vision, warm layers, and thermoses. The protocol was plain. Slow the breath until the nervous system stops shouting. Open the field of attention so the periphery is included. Watch without naming. Write before speaking so memory cannot be reshaped by conversation. They learned to tolerate long silences without calling them failures and to resist the relief of easy explanations. By 1999, the work had texture. Participants practiced short cycles of regulated breathing, quiet nasal inhales, longer exhales to lengthen the vagal rhythm. They tested posture: soft jaw to blunt the startle reflex, relaxed shoulders to reduce unnecessary tension, feet planted to channel adrenaline into balance rather than tremor. They invented paired attention drills in which 2 people silently tracked the same slice of sky, then wrote separate accounts before any comparison. When notes converged on specifics, a halt too clean to obey inertia, a change of direction like a thought, a dimming that behaved more like a disappearing, they gave those convergences weight without turning them into doctrine. In 2000, the circles multiplied. The network was real but intentionally nameless. No rosters, no maps, no public calendars. Anonymity protected privacy and kept attention on craft over personality. People moved houses or changed jobs and quietly founded new circles elsewhere, carrying the same ethic: do less, notice more, be precise, remain kind. Events worthy of record occurred just often enough to keep courage honest. On some nights, insects fell abruptly silent as though a dimmer had been turned. A compact light rose from the horizon and held position against wind. 3 points formed a triangle and refused to drift. A brightness increased without growing larger, a behavior the logs called intensity without size. None of this proved anything to outsiders, and the circles did not try to make it do so. They were building competence, not arguments. In 2001, discipline deepened. Participants learned regional flight patterns and watched scheduled satellite trains so the ordinary could be subtracted before wonder was added. They observed meteor showers deliberately to inoculate themselves against misreading arcs. They logged weather quirks that could paint strange halos near the horizon. When fatigue produced illusions at 3 in the morning, they logged those too. The humility had teeth. To claim less was to see more. And in seeing more, fear lost ground. People discovered that courage is not the absence of alarm. It is the capacity to metabolize alarm without letting it dictate behavior. Meanwhile, something else emerged that statistics could not quite hold: coherence in how the environment responded. Silence often preceded appearances by seconds. A faint, bone-deep tone sometimes arrived before the first light. Warmth would spread across forearms during a cold night without a source. These sensations were not treated as proof. They were treated as data to be compared across circles. When similarities recurred beyond chance, the circles sharpened their attention further rather than relaxing into belief. By the end of 2001, the practice had become a portable culture. People taught one another how to sit with ambiguity without numbing out, how to compare notes without competing, how to keep private lives intact while offering free hours to the night. They were not staging a spectacle. They were apprenticing themselves to steadiness. If extraterrestrials chose to step closer, someone somewhere would be ready to meet them without collapsing the moment into panic or propaganda. The year closed with a quiet confidence that did not require slogans. People who had arrived hoping for spectacle found something subtler and more demanding, an education in attention. They learned that precision is a form of respect, that patience is a kind of strength, and that humility is the single best guardrail against both credulity and contempt. They also learned that the skills they practiced under the sky followed them home. Tempers cooled more quickly, sleeplessness eased, conversations slowed enough for listening to happen. In a world tuned for speed and certainty, these small changes felt like the first stones of a safer bridge. From 1998 through 2001, the circles had not proved anything to the world, and they did not need to. They had proved to themselves that a steady human instrument could be built, one breath, one note, one honest line in a notebook at a time. Between 2002 and 2004, the network refined its muscles the way musicians refine scales, repetition without boredom, detail without drama. Circles adopted pre-brief and debrief checklists. Before each session, confirm timekeeping, test the red filters, review flight paths and satellite passes, agree on hand signals for silence and for logging, assign a calm voice to lead the comparison afterward. After each session, drink water, eat something warm, record first impressions in ink before any talk, then move through the timeline minute by minute so memory cannot slide into story. Nothing about this looked glamorous. It looked like good fieldwork, which is what it was. The phenomena answered with matching sobriety. On multiple winter nights in 2002, 3 points lifted from the horizon in sequence, left, right, center, and held a fixed geometry for several minutes before fading as if a dimmed lamp had been placed behind the sky. In spring 2003, a faint, ground-borne hum preceded certain appearances by less than a minute. Logs from circles hundreds of miles apart captured the same order: hum, environmental hush, emergence, hold, departure. In summer 2003, several observers recorded a brightness that appeared to dilate rather than grow, a peculiar behavior the notes labeled increase without approach. These details were not shouted. They were catalogued. Dream work expanded during this phase. Participants set notebooks beside their beds and wrote within a minute of waking, before even a whispered conversation. Across that year, a pattern resurfaced, circular spaces filled with a soft light whose source could not be seen, symbols that felt like both language and geometry, and a posture lesson, feet grounded, chin level, shoulders quiet, offered without words. Some woke with tears and no fear. Others woke with a sensation like relief passing through the ribs. The circles treated these reports neither as gospel nor as trivia. They were held as interior data, to be compared for structure rather than decoration. The network also learned how easy it is to fool oneself. A lens flare tricked an eager newcomer, and became a training module on optics the next week. A cluster of high-altitude aircraft, arranged by chance, mimicked a deliberate triangle, and the group built a library of sound so the ear could collaborate with the eye. A satellite train crossed at an unfamiliar angle, and participants added real-time satellite checks to the pre-brief. Mistakes did not embarrass the culture, they improved it. Confidence grew not from erasing error but from digesting it. In 2004, multiple circles began scheduling synchronized sessions without announcing them publicly. At a chosen minute, they settled into the same breathing pattern: 4 counts in, brief hold, 6 counts out, then softened their gaze until the sky felt like a dome held in common. No results were demanded, yet on several nights the logs showed a shared brightening of mood followed by brief appearances along the horizon, as though an orchestra had tuned to one pitch and a note had answered. Whether causation or correlation, the exercise trained attention to move together across distance. By 2005, the ethic had matured into something that could be taught quickly and well. Newcomers were told from the first evening that this work does not trade in heroes. There would be no named locations, no published schedules, no personalities at the center. The practice was anonymous by design, because anonymity kept the focus on craft. People who sought spectacle rarely stayed. People who sought steadiness tended to blossom. The circles became known, only to those who sat in them, as places where precision and kindness shared the same bench. During these years, the question that guided everything was simple: what makes a human instrument trustworthy in the presence of the unknown? The answers were simple too. Regulate fear rather than deny it. Subtract the ordinary before pointing to the extraordinary. Describe what happened rather than declaring what it means. Keep private life intact. Show up on time. Breathe. And you? Have you ever experienced a moment, a dream, a light, a hush, so precisely timed that it felt larger than coincidence? Share it in the comments below. I would truly like to read your account. The circles did not claim revelation. They claimed readiness. By late 2005, multiple regions had teams capable of holding long, uneventful nights without fraying and sudden, luminous minutes without coming apart. That capacity, calm endurance paired with exact description, was the real product of the era. The visitors, if they were watching, had a clear signal to evaluate. Here is a species practicing adulthood under pressure. If you step closer, we will not beg for proof or run for cover. We will steady ourselves and listen. What surprised many participants most was how these playing habits migrated into daytime life. Arguments at work cooled before they ignited. Parents reported that children slept better when the household practiced slower breathing after sunset. People who had dreaded uncertainty began to carry it like weather, noticed, accommodated, rarely dramatized. None of those outcomes were the stated goal, yet they strengthened the case for continuing. A practice that makes citizens steadier is worth keeping even if the sky remains quiet. It is indispensable if the sky decides not to. From 2006 through 2008, the work crossed an invisible threshold. What had felt like a set of local practices began to behave like a single organism spread across distance. On a cold night in early 2007, circles separated by hundreds of miles recorded the same sequence within minutes of one another. Environmental hush, low bone tone, emergence at the horizon, triangular hold without drift, collapse to a single point, departure. None of the circles knew the others were out. Only later, after anonymized logs were compared, did the pattern reveal itself. Coincidence remained a possible word, but it no longer felt like the right one. Dreams added another layer of coordination. In mid-2007, separate participants wrote before dawn about standing in circular halls where light seemed to have weight. They described symbols that resonated like chords, meaning felt before translation. They reported being coached in posture rather than catechism. Stand steadily, breathe slowly, attend without grasping. Upon waking, many felt rinsed of panic. A few wrote that the familiar world seemed sharper, as if someone had turned up the resolution on reality itself. As reports multiplied, the culture tightened its guardrails. The network doubled down on anonymity, not as secrecy but as hygiene. No one became the face of anything. No sites were advertised. Schedules were never broadcast. The intent was to prevent hero stories and tourist waves, both of which corrode careful work. The unknown would be met by citizens, not celebrities. In 2008, training shifted toward endurance. Circles learned to hold attention for longer stretches without degrading into jitters or boredom. They integrated short movement drills to discharge adrenaline after startling events so memories could settle without smear. They practiced a protocol for the instant a light appeared. Notice, note, breathe, widen vision. Do not reach for a device until the first 60 seconds have been lived. Many newcomers found this last instruction difficult, yet when they obeyed it, their accounts grew richer and the group's composure deepened. The phenomena, for their part, seemed tuned to the threshold between obvious and deniable. A skeptic driving by might see nothing conclusive. A trained circle, however, recognized signatures that repeated across years and regions: brightness without approach, turns that ignored inertia, silence that arrived like a curtain dropping a heartbeat before emergence. The visitors, if that is the correct word, appeared less interested in proving a point than in shaping a capacity. They did not overwhelm. They invited growth. Midway through 2008, several groups experimented with gentle synchronization exercises across distance. At an agreed minute, circles adopted the same breath pattern for 60 seconds, then relaxed into a wide, shared gaze. No demands were made of the sky, yet on nights like these many logs recorded a subtle brightening of mood followed by brief, precise appearances. Whether the exercises drew the events, or merely tuned people to notice them remained unsettled. What mattered was that the practice unified attention without breeding ideology. Quick check-in: does this way of approaching the unknown, patient, disciplined, collaborative, resonate with you? Drop a comment and follow the channel so stories like this find people who value rigor as much as wonder. Perhaps the most instructive single event occurred on a windswept night near the end of 2008. The air was cold and thin. A faint luminescence pooled just above the ground as if dew had learned to glow. The group's first impulse, hampered by training, was to stay still. Breath slowed. Posture softened. Eyes widened without strain. The glow gathered into a bead and rose to treetop height, held there for a count that felt like forever, and then slid sideways with an economy of motion that made everyone's stomach drop. It dimmed without shrinking, then was gone. The silence afterward felt physical, as though sound itself required time to return from a distance. The logs taken that night remain models of sobriety. Times noted, headings estimated, sensations described without embroidery. The days that followed brought no proclamations, only refinement. The circle updated its checklist. It added reminders to drink water before any analysis. It recorded fatigue levels beside perceptions so patterns could be correlated with clarity. It wrote a short paragraph to onboard newcomers gently: you will want closure, instead you will receive craft. Keep practicing. Accept that not knowing is not failure. Hold your center. The sky, if it is listening, will meet you halfway. By the close of that year, participants noticed a social effect that rarely gets measured: kindness increased. People who could sit together for hours in shared uncertainty discovered they could disagree without heat during the day. Neighbors who once rolled eyes at one another's hobbies now shared thermoses on winter hills. A small civic competence was being rehearsed: patience under pressure, accuracy without arrogance, courage without theater. Even those who eventually drifted away tended to keep one habit: writing observations before speaking them, because it improved conversations everywhere else. The practice was doing double duty, preparing for extraordinary contact while restoring ordinary sanity. By 2009, the preparation felt less like an experiment and more like a culture with memory. New circles formed with ease because the craft could be taught in an evening and polished over months: breath, posture, attention, note-taking, comparison, rest. The ethic remained stubbornly ordinary. Nothing was for sale, no faces were branded, and no location was offered up to satisfy curiosity. The network kept itself small in public and large in practice, choosing durability over drama. In the first half of 2009, several regions logged sequences that later lined up within narrow windows of time. In one, a low tone arrived like pressure behind the eyes. In another, insects hushed to the point that the absence of sound felt loud. Then a single light appeared at the horizon, held as if distance were irrelevant, and slid laterally with a precision that ignored wind. Independent estimates of headings disagreed by a few degrees, as one would expect from different vantage points, but durations matched with eerie fidelity. Where accounts diverged, the culture assumed perspective or weather, not deceit. Though questions were asked and answered. Were clocks synchronized? Were people exhausted? Did anyone copy prior language? The result was not a myth but a careful braid of coincident reports. During the summer, the focus shifted inward. If the visitors preferred thresholds to finales, then the human side of the threshold had to be strengthened. Circles extended their uneventful sits, practiced softening the jaw exactly when surprise clenched it, rehearsed what to do when adrenaline spiked: long exhale, loosen the belly, widen vision, lower shoulders. They committed to staying 5 minutes after a disappearance rather than bursting into chatter. They refined the comparison process so quiet voices were heard before confident ones. The aim was simple: keep the signal from being crushed by enthusiasm. In early 2010, an event occurred that many now refer to simply as the hinge of the early era. Multiple circles, unaware of one another's plans, began sessions within the same hour. Logs later revealed a shared arc: environmental hush, bone tone felt more than heard, emergence, triangular hold, single point collapse, departure, long return to ordinary sound. Nothing about the sequence was cinematic. Everything about it was coherent. The effect on participants was immediate and oddly domestic. They did not run to announce anything. They slept, went to work, paid bills, and looked after children. What changed was interior, a quiet sense that years of practice had not been vanity. In the weeks that followed, circles tuned their systems the way technicians tune an instrument. Checklists were tightened. Real-time satellite and air traffic checks were simplified so one person could handle them without losing the sky. Debriefs began with water and food before words. Teams audited anonymized logs to see where wording had drifted toward drama. Newcomers were reminded that this project does not exist to defeat skeptics or to comfort believers. It exists to make human beings steadier in the presence of the unknown. That purpose proved strangely contagious. People who had arrived for fireworks discovered a taste for precision. By mid-2010, an unflashy milestone had been reached: the ability to scale without losing character. A guide could prepare 5 or 7 others, who in turn could see new circles, and the method held. It held because it was humble. It asked little more of people than honesty, patience, and practice. It offered little more in return than clarity and the possibility of contact. That bargain, demanding and modest, kept the network honest. The closing months of 2010 felt like the end of a first movement. The people who had been present since 1998 sensed that the scaffolding was in place. They had learned to subtract the ordinary before reaching for the extraordinary. They had taught their bodies not to panic at the edge of the familiar. They had learned to write first, speak second, and claim as little as possible. Whether or not open contact would arrive, they had built a foundation that honored the unknown. If extraterrestrials were paying attention, and those involved felt they were, the signal humanity sent by the end of that year was legible. We are learning to meet you without theatricality, without flattery, without self-betrayal. The sky did not owe anyone closure. Yet it had given something better: a curriculum. Breadth, attention, rigor, generosity, restraint. These are not the glamorous tools of revelation. They are the durable tools of relationship. They make people worthy of more truth than they could bear before. When the calendar turned and the next decade began, the network kept its posture. It did not pivot to publicity or yield to fatigue. It continued to do the small, human things that let big, non-human things approach, arrive on time, prepare the body, honor the notebook, listen more than you speak, and leave places cleaner than you found them. If the next chapter was to include direct dialogue, the people who had built the first bridge were ready to step onto it with steady hands. And if that chapter never came, the bridge would still be worth crossing, every evening, into a deeper kind of citizenship under the same sky. If this story caught your attention, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who are also fascinated by UFOs. And leave your thoughts in the comments. What do you think really happened?